All right, welcome to this edition of the Wrestling Retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Earnest EJ Christian, coming to you as part, of course, of the Retrospective podcast. One episode in already. And, of course, this podcast, you can subscribe to all podcasts. First off, you can find this podcast by subscribing to the Retrospective podcast on any podcast catcher, such as Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, of course, Apple Podcasts, you name it. And, of course, if you want to listen to the rest of the Retrospective episodes, especially, because obviously all this stuff's in the same feed. You have Football's Awesome. You have, of course, In the Paint. Of course, the regular podcast. We do the interviews and my own solo stuff, of course, all that. But they all have their own playlist on the Earnest EJ Speaking Media YouTube page. So go to Earnest Speaking Media on YouTube, and you'll find the Wrestling Retrospective, and you find, of course, all the episodes related to this concept. So, anyway. This shouldn't be a long one. Probably going to keep us about close to 20 minutes, if not shorter. But this week is actually a big week, because this week actually is the 20-year anniversary of the call-up for Randy Orton. Randy Orton, of course, is, the Viper, the Legend Killer, all that. This week, he debuted on WWE television for the first time. Of course, long career, still relevant, still kicking ass. So obviously, he's in a great angle right now with with Riddle, the RK Bro angle and all that, which has been fantastic for the last almost. I think it's been a year already since they've been doing this. So there's been a lot of talk about on the wrestling community, on the IWC, the internet wrestling community, about Randy Orton, his legacy, and where does he rank and all that. I know on the Take 3 Wrestling podcast we discussed it a little bit last fall about Orton. We did a segment on the show. Of course, that show's as well as on this feed as well. We did a segment on that show about Randy Orton. It was not really much in detail. I guess there was some details on the video, but we didn't really get into like the specifics of ranking him and all that. And I wasn't really going to speak much about this honestly this week, other than show my respect, of course, and all that. But then, when I started talking about it a little bit on the internet, on Twitter, obviously we ended up having a major conversation about Randy Orton and where he ranks and all that, and just about really about his legacy and just about the importance of his character, 20 years later. I mean, this guy's 20 years in, and he's still, you could argue he's doing his best work today. Now, what's fascinating for me is that the majority of Randy Orton's run, in fact, I'll say pretty much 80% of his run, I didn't get to experience in real time. So Randy Orton debuted, of course, like I said, 20 years ago, it's April, so this month, 20 years ago, I stopped watching the product literally 3 weeks before he would debut, somewhere around there, about 3-4 weeks before he debuted. Because WrestleMania 18 was, I believe, late March in 2002. So I stopped watching right after that WrestleMania. Pretty much, I think I watched one more Raw, and that was it. I was out. And honestly, I always checked in, here and there, but it was never really something serious. And yes, I've heard Randy Orton, of course. When you talk about the pillars of the last 20 years, the Ruthless Aggression era, you're talking about, of course, John Cena. You're talking about Brock Lesnar. You're talking about Batista. Edge's big run. And, of course, Randy Orton. Obviously, Randy Orton is one of the biggest names in the last 20 years in the company. And, of course, I knew his dad, not personally, but I know about his father, Bob Orton, who, of course, was he was fairly well known in the Hulkamania era. Especially the angles with Hogan and Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff and Mr. T. He was involved in the first WrestleMania. So in the main event, obviously the Orton name is pretty well known. But Randy, of course, has surpassed him a long time ago. That's not even a conversation. So obviously, if you follow wrestling and you talk about wrestling, it's about different topics and all that. Obviously, you talk about Mount Rushmores and who's top this and who's top this era and that, and And that was what happened this week on Twitter with Randy Orton. Of course, as you said, it's 20-year anniversary, so naturally that's going to happen. So I started talking about it on Twitter. Major conversation about that. So I said, okay. So basically what I said, my tweet started like this, saying that Randy Orton is easily a top 15 guy. Easily top 20. Definitely top 15 in my opinion. And I think he's a lot closer to 10 than people realize. Now, I said this about context, of course. I said about context, and people start weighing in and giving their opinions. And some people who always watch the product today, some have an opinion that he's top 10 already. Some said he's slightly out of it. There's some people who probably don't watch the product today don't understand how much Randy Orton's meant to the business in the last 20 years, but weighing in as well, too, which is fine. So, of course, if you're going to do this, we have to have context, of course. It's important to have context, of course. So I decided, you know what? Let's have a discussion about this. Let's have a real discussion about this. And let's look at the business of the last 40 years. Which, by the way, we're going to do a WWE 40 episode. Not episode, multiple episodes, but we're going to do a top ranking of the 40 best, biggest superstars in the history of the company on the Tape 3 as well. So, what we do, of course, is that, okay, we go ahead and we lock in a top 10. I started doing the top 10, my list of top 10. In no order, of course, because obviously the order goes to more contests, but you can find obviously 5, 6, 7, I say 7 guys that are, no matter where you rank them, they're definitely in the top 10. Definitely top 10. So where does Legend Killer rank? Where does the Viper rank among all time? I've always said Randy Orton to me he's the WWE's version of Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan to me is a top 10 all-time NBA player. Now, he may not be there much longer once we get in the next couple of years as the new crop of talent starts to build a resume, but Tim Duncan to me is a top 10, borderline top 10 guy, in NBA history. And the reason I compared him to Randy Orton, or Randy Orton to him, is because Tim Duncan was never really the tippy top guy, although he probably was for a couple of years. There might have been a year or two where he was, because he came in the end of the Jordan era, obviously the Kobe Shaq era, when the Lakers were dominating him, but his first 1 titles in that time too. And then LeBron came in. So, but Tim Duncan's has always been steady, always been reliable, there's been no fall off. It's always been no major highs, but no low lows. He's been very steady throughout his entire career. Winning 5 titles in 6 finals appearances. Probably won 6, obviously. Thank God he did it, because obviously he beat my Miami Heat. But, Tim Duncan's been steady and reliable, Mr. Fundamental. And Randy Orton is the same guy, in my opinion. Now, again, I stopped watching for 17 years between 2002 and 2019. So, in watching his career in hindsight, especially, it's been a different perspective for me, watching him. Understand how great he is, but I had to see for myself, what exactly is this? Why is this guy so revered in the same way? And I've been watching, every so often I try to watch documentaries on the Ruthless Aggression era and obviously the PG era and all that, and just seeing the stuff he's done. He was never really considered a top 10, top guy in the company. There might have been 1 year or maybe a 6-month span where he was probably the top guy. I would say probably 2010, 2011 when he was feuding with Christian at the time. I think Cena went away for a little bit. John Cena, but he's always been, if not the top guy, always the next guy, always near the top of the card. Always reliable. So, that being said, where would you rank Randy Orton all time? That's the question. So, I did a list. So, obviously, you do a list. You look at a list. Who are your lock top 10? Who are your lock guys that no matter where you rank them, they're definitely in the top 10? For me, obviously, Hulk Hogan. No question about that. That's 1. You go Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's another 1. That's 2. You go The Rock. That's 3. John Cena. 4. To me, Shawn Michaels. Or going to be, my opinion, the greatest performer in the history of the company. That's 5. Mr. WrestleMania. Undertaker is 6. Macho Man Randy Savage is 7. Then you have 3 spots here. I put Bret Hart in that conversation. That's 8. Bret Hart is definitely in the top 10 all time WWE history. Okay. Now you got 2 spots. Who is his second spot? Who's the 2 spot? Who filled in 2 spots? And there are many guys you consider. So this is what's interesting about talk about WWE and talk about the rankings and talk about where exactly people lie and all that. So you got a kerfuffle of probably, I would say, in my opinion, 5, 6, 7 guys you can really consider. Not saying they're going to be there, but you can consider them in the conversation. Which that in itself is amazing itself, honestly. So you have people say, "Oh, Andre Giants will be there," and while that may be the case, my boy, shout out to Robert Bonnet on Twitter for pointing us out that even though Andre Giant might be in that conversation, his best years were pre Vince Jr. So because by the time Vince McMahon took over for his dad in 1982, Andre had already been on his last legs at that point. So it's hard to put him in that conversation. So, and obviously when you're doing these rankings, if you're going to really do, it's hard because do you include, Vince Senior, because then you go into a situation where you talk about Bruno Sammartino, you talk about Pedro Morales, you talk about other guys of that magnitude, and then it makes the list harder to put together. So I've always said that it's easier to do these rankings based on the Vince McMahon Jr. era. Hence why the WWE 40 thing is going to be a thing this year, because this year's his 40th year of owning the company to take over his dad. So that being said, again, you got two spots. Like I said, you have Hogan, you have Austin, you have Rock, you have John Cena, of course. Which by the way, those four guys are the Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. Those are Mount Rushmore. Now, you reckon what the hell you want, but they're in the Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. You got Shawn Michaels, you got Undertaker, you got Macho Man Randy Savage, and then I said I got Bret Hart. Okay? So that's 8 guys right there, who to me are the pillars of this company. Okay? 2 spots left. I thought about it long hard. You have guys you consider like Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero. You got so many great guys through the years, that's come through those halls of WWE. Edge, So, but to me, number 9 for me, and that's not, again, not in order. This is the 9th person I put on this top 10 is Brock Lesnar, because yes, his first run 2002, 2004, but impactful. Put him over the top. He was the guy for a while, and he was impactful. Okay, he goes away for 8 years. It was 8 years, right? 8 years. 2012. Okay, he goes away. He tries to play football. Obviously, tries to play the Vikings. That didn't work out. He goes to UFC. Does a little bit of that for a little bit. I think it was 3-2 in his career. He comes back in 2012 and has these last 10 years have been one of the best runs ever. And yeah, people say, well, he's part time. He's been part time most of the time. That's a good thing though, because I think what Brock Lesnar, what makes it work for him is because the fact that he's not, when he does come back every so often, you'll go away a couple months and comes back, it's always fresh. He beat the streak as Taker, and he's just the guy that, he's putting guys over, and he's just been so impactful in the way. Like, he's main event WrestleManias a bunch of times. His run between 2014 and 15, that 1 year between where he beats a streak and he dominates Cena at the SummerSlam and all that. It's one of the best runs in the history of the company, in my opinion. The singular runs, in my opinion. Granted, he didn't wrestle a lot in that, but it was still. But it's still the perspective is still the perception of dominance. And even today, his run he just did recently here, prior to WrestleMania against Roman, the Cowboy Brock thing. You have to put him in the top 10, in my opinion. You have to. A lot of people will disagree with that, and that's fine. It's okay. This is my list, though. This is not, so now leaves one spot left. One spot left. And again, I mentioned guys, I just mentioned last one to you. Who you consider. You consider, again, the, Chris Jericho's and Angles and all those guys. All those guys are in the conversation. To me, honestly, it just comes down to 2 guys, honestly, that one spot. It comes down to Triple H, and it comes down to Randy Orton. So Randy Orton is definitely on the cusp, if not top 10 all time. So who do you go to between the 2 guys? And this is the hard part, because both have the, like I said, Randy Orton's advantage is the longevity part, but so is Triple H. Triple H was there from 1995 and carried the company even through some slow times. When you lose Austin and The Rock for a while you're developing Cena, Hunter's the guy for a little while. Hunter was always that guy. You could argue that Triple H really is Randy Orton before Randy Orton became Randy Orton in a lot of ways. He was the dependable, reliable guy no matter what happened. So in a lot of ways, these 2 mirror each other. Go figure the fact that they both did Evolution together and whatnot, and even other stuff after that. So who do you put? Do you put Triple H? To me, do you put Triple H or Randy Orton? I kind of lean Hunter a little bit because of this is the guy that made event of WrestleManias, and this is Impact in general, not just in the ring, but obviously doing NXT and all that. So I would probably right now put Hunter there by a smidge. I'll put Triple H at number 10 by a smidge. I do think, though, because Orton's in fantastic shape, I think Orton can go another 5-10 years, honestly, in this role. He's in great shape, like I said. Because if Undertaker can do this, and so can Goldberg, and all these other guys in the 50s do this, Ric Flair did it. In this era, when it's a lot easier to be this guy, why couldn't Randy Orton? And I think if we revisit this topic again, say in even 5 years, I think Orton cracks a 10 automatically without even a question. In fact, you can argue he might be able to take out some guys. I think you can probably consider taking out. I hate to say this because I'm a diehard fan. You can consider taking out Savage. You can consider taking out Bret Hart maybe at some point. I don't know, but I think those guys right now are still, because Savage held the top for a year. He was a guy for a long time. He was reliable for that era. He was tippy top guy right there with Hogan. Same with Bret and Shawn. Holding things down in the New Generation era. So I don't know. I think I'll probably give Hunter the slight edge at 10 and Orton at 11. But it's freaking close. It's really close, dude. It really is. So, but again, like I said, I think if we have this conversation in a couple of years, it might be Orton with a bullet, because he's not slowing down. That's the thing. He's not slowing down, and he's in fantastic shape. He's having to me, a lot of people say this is his best run he's had. So, I don't know. I'll give it 100 at 10 and by slot. I mean, we can go 10A, 10B, right? Orton and Hunter and Orton, obviously. But like I said, both those guys marry each other too. So I don't know. My top 10 guys are going to be obviously in no order: Austin, Hogan, Cena, Rock, Savage, Hart, Michaels. What am I missing here? Michaels, Taker, Lesnar, and then Hunter, and then Orton's right there. Orton's just right there on the edge. So, but again, shout out to Randy Orton, 20 years in the business, still kicking ass, doing the damn thing. Him and Riddle, RK Bro, it's been a fantastic run, and I really believe he's gonna go 10 more years, 10 plus years. I really believe it. So, and he has said that he wants to go a long time. So, anyway, that is it for this episode of the Wrestling Retrospective. Look out for another one in the coming days or so, however we do it. I'm on Twitter at EJ Christian 7. And till the next one, talk to you guys later.